Welcome to A Woman's Brew, where women talk about beer. In today's book club episode, we toast Mallory O'Meara's Girly Drinks and the boozy trailblazers that came before us. I'm Joanne, and this is Tori.
Hello, hello.
And we're two beer-loving women on a mission to get more people drinking and talking about great beer. Come join us. Well, first book club. Let's do a book club. How long have we been saying?
I thought we could intro it because
We'll
we
do a book
just
club.
constantly are talking about we should do a book club. We should do a book club. I've got so many books that I was like, oh, I should read this, but I'm not gonna because we want to do it for a book club. And what I didn't want to fall into the trap of is starting to read something and then being like book club, and then I either have to reread it or be like, shit, what did I read?
Like I'm going to be like today, because I read this about a year ago and I've flicked through and been like, oh yeah, that was interesting. Oh, that was interesting. But I haven't had time to reread it. So I'm like, I remember some of it.
I read it January. Well, I listened to it. So I guess the first question, did you read it or did you listen to it? Did you properly read it? Audible?
Yeah.
I audiobooked it as well. But I did get the book as well.
Yep. So this is for anybody that's not a book person. This is a trophy now. This is your book trophy. So you listen to it, but you need because it's so good,
I was like,
you need your trophy for your shelf.
I also just like physical books. The worst part is though, is I realised I thought I already had it because normally when I listen to an audiobook of something, I buy it as well, especially if it's like one of the ones that you can like listen to for free. Like if I can, it's not free though, because I say like listen to free with Spotify Premium. It's not really free because I pay Spotify Premium, but I also know that they probably get fuck all from the Spotify that I pay for. So I always buy the books anyways, unless it's something that I'm like, oh, not sure if I'm going to like it or not. But yeah, I bought it and I wanted to be able to mark it up, but it took too long to get to me compared to, and then I didn't have the time. So all my notes are somewhere else, but this is pristine condition. So when you say it's like, this is your trophy, this is legitimately like my trophy because it's not even been flipped through. I think I flicked through the first like few pages, as I started trying to mark it up, and then I went, nope, I don't have time, and then put it to the side. But I'm very happy with it. It'll be a book that I can loan out to other people if I trust them.
Oh no.
Depends on the person. Some people yes, some people no. I think we're going to try to do somewhat regular book clubs, whether that is like on a quarterly basis or, you know, depends on our schedules. We'll try to do something somewhat regular. I don't think we've got a shortage of books. Got a lot of really good books I want to read. I've been reading I basically had Trouble Brewing in the Loire, which that one's like a really good one, but that's like that one's not like the same type of like it is, I guess, historical in a way. It's like basically what one of the guys that has a brewery wrote about himself, but like it's a really great book because it's hilarious. But like I think we've got a good amount of books between us so far that we can read, so I was like, I think I can read that. But looking at the back of this book, the Girly Drinks book, we even have like Patton Oswalt commented on it and stuff. Like that's impressive. That's good. That's speaks volumes right there, more than we ever could. But hopefully I mean, we're not Patton Oswalt, but hopefully we can kind of talk through some of these books. You know, we don't want to talk too much about them in the sense of like where we talk in minute details and then give stuff away.
Spoilers.
I think we want you to read it. Exactly. You know, we can we want to have general talks off the back end of it as well. Share overall thoughts. We'll try to have some few reoccurring discussion points, I think. So yeah, I guess before we start talking about the book, what are you drinking? What are you wearing? So I feel like what are you wearing? When I say what are you wearing, I don't mean that in a sexist way of like when people are like, what are you wearing? Because you're a female. I mean, like, I don't know. I always pick my shirt to match with a theme. So I just today. Did you not?
No, I was at work today, so I've got my
what is it, a work shirt?
This is my Yakima Harvest Tour 2023 t-shirt.
Nice. I like that. I like the sad answer. Like,
I'm in the office today. I'll put on one of my Hearts shirts.
Is how you went, I didn't. That's
However,
really
My beer is themed to the book.
I was waiting for you to go, that's also not themed.
No, but it nearly wasn't, because I was flicking. I went through my stash list and I was like, oh, I'll find this one. That'll be for it. Could not find the beer that I was looking for. Couldn't find. I was looking for the old-fashioned stout from Unbarred.
Oh,
It's somewhere. Well, it's in a fridge somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So I was like, oh, because I really wanted
I had mine and it's delish.
Cocktail inspired beer, because I was really inspired by the cocktail makers in this book. So I was like, I didn't think I was going to be able to do that because I couldn't find it. But then I was like, wait, I know where I have something. I have Sirens refashioned.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good one.
An old-fashioned cocktail.
You also have Sirens Calypso Negroni and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's not in the fridge though. I knew this was in the fridge.
Oh, fair.
And I didn't know if we were saving the Negroni for something else, so I didn't want to drink it.
Fair.
But also, in addition, this was aged for 46 months, so that comes off of
off a goal for you, doesn't it?
Of my drink harder challenge as well. So win-win on that.
You pulled it out of the bag, though.
Yeah, saved it. So the t-shirt, no, but the drink, yeah.
That was the most sad response to the t-shirt, though.
And
that broke my
delicious.
heart. It's fucking awesome.
You raved about it, which is why I bought it. And
I love it.
I'm really enjoying it.
It is literally my favourite barley wine.
I mean, it's 10.6% on a Tuesday night, but I'll just sip away on it.
Fair.
It's 10.4%, which is danger juice.
Yeah, no, that is the problem, isn't it? That is the problem.
Anyway, what are you drinking?
Do you want to know what I'm wearing as well?
Yeah, tell me what you're wearing.
Come on, Barbie, let's crush the patriarchy.
Yes.
From Women Invented Beer. It's my pink shirt. It's got a Barbie drinking a bottle. And yeah, it's got that written on it. I thought I'd wear my pink vest to this as well, just to prove a point. If I want to wear pink, I'm going to wear pink. But also then with a layering of grey over it, because that's a lot of colour. So what am I drinking? So you went for a cocktail-inspired beer. I went for a beer cocktail.
Oh.
Because literally I used Chat GPT to create me a cocktail based off of. So I guess that's just one thing I want to touch upon. We can share all these links, but there was a link that I found when trying to find just an overall list of the chapters, because how I made my notes and how I had it in Audible, it was really hard to find a list. So I went to go find a list, and on Mallory O'Meara's website, full on, each chapter has a suggested drink. It's a drink pairing for Girly Drinks, which I thought was awesome. So the prehistory one, I asked you earlier today, not having seen this, just because of the first part of the book, I was like, are we drinking that mead that we have? Because I was going to drink mead. And then I find that chapter 1, prehistory, has got mead on it. And I was like, well, that's great. Scrolling through, you've got lots of different ones. When you get towards the end, it becomes less about styles and more cocktails. And my favorite one, I'm gonna save who it is, but my favorite pairing for my favorite chapter, and the one I found the most interesting and the coolest to relate to, the paired cocktail for that chapter is Mary Pickford. Is called a Mary Pickford, which is 1.5 ounce rum, 1.5 ounce pineapple juice, a teaspoon of grenadine, 6 drops of maraschino liquor, shake with ice and strain into basically a cup. I don't have maraschino cherry. Weirdly, I tried to buy it because I was going to make some cocktails over the weekend. Couldn't find any, so I had no cherries. Nope. So I decided, just because in my local shops, I didn't go to Tesco's or anything. So I decided to use ChatGPT to try to make a recipe for a beer cocktail with the Mary Pickford inspiration. And what it gave me was, I think it called it a Mary Beerford, or there was one that was a Beery Pickford or something like that.
Nice.
And it was pineapple juice. I think I closed ChatGPT, so I can't tell you. It was pineapple juice, grenadine, and a beer. It said a lager or a wheat beer. I had done one before it, but it wanted lots of things like the cherry and stuff like that I couldn't get. So I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's let's try again. And it was suggesting a Pilsner as one of the options as well. So I was like, oh, well, what ties into another chapter is I've got Gentile Brewing Co., one of the places I got in the US. Beer is art, and it's a South African Pilsner. So I thought I would kind of mix two different chapters from the book together to get this beery cocktail. This is what it looks like. It's a play off of like a tequila sunrise almost.
Oh, fun.
If you're watching the video, it's layered, it's beautiful. I put a straw in it because we'll talk about why I put a straw in it, because one of the best facts that I learned from that book. I've not had a sip of it yet, so I'm quite interested. I'm stirring it now just to see what it's going to taste like. Oh my God. That tastes like grenadine. I'm not mad though. I like grenadine. It's fine.
Did it have 5 ingredients?
No, it didn't, but that's okay. I have a contingency plan for that. I don't think it had 5 ingredients. I mean, do you count ice as an ingredient?
No, I don't think you can count
and
ice.
I didn't put the pineapple in it.
You can count one garnish.
I didn't put the pineapple in it because I was like, it's wasteful to put a pineapple in there at the moment because I just don't want it.
Yeah.
So it was grenadine, pineapple juice, and beer. Yeah. No. And ice.
Can recommend Chat GTP for coming up with cocktail recipes.
Yeah, 100%. And you'll find out in another episode why. But yeah, oh my God, it's turned the straw. The grenadine has turned the straw red. And I had to do like rough, because it was all like listed in US stuff as well, like US measurements stuff. So I had to kind of be like, what's the best way for me to work this out? And like awkwardly how they chose to give it. So I was like, I'll do it in tablespoons because that's easy. So I don't know if I think I probably put too much grenadine in it, but I'll just keep topping it up with beer. I did also give myself some beer on the side because I just wanted to know what it was going to taste like. Nice. Anyways, so some of the things that I thought would be interesting to share at the start as well. Do you want to do the reading of the description of the book for anyone that's interested?
Do you know, can I just point out that I used to like the days where the book description was on the back of the book. And nowadays you have to go searching for it inside the book.
Gone are those days. Well, lucky for you, if you look at the script, I did link us to the Goodreads.
I mean, I have it here, but I was like, it was something that someone said the other week because while we're doing book club, I am on Bookstagram now, peeps, because I drink. I
thought I'd give you a way to promote your Bookstagram.
I read so many books now that I was like, you know what, it doesn't quite always work on my beer page, so I'm going to started a book Instagram. So if you want to come see what books I read, come to Joanne_listens to books. So
I tried to help you with the name, but I feel like
couldn't get a good one. Like all the good ones.
I think all the ones that I thought would be really good for you, I was like, oh, but that could be borderline pornographic. Your algorithms could be really,
too niche,
really fucked. Like you're going to end up with weirdness.
Totally going off on a tangent here about books. There's a trend going around at the minute where you do your username in like frame letters, and each one of the letters is like either a favourite book or a book that you've liked that starts with that letter. My username's really long. It took me a really long time to do it because so many letters. So sometimes you have to think about how long your username is.
Yeah, or I would just probably be like, I'll just do part of my username. No,
I did the whole thing twice. Also, in fact, I did it twice because
that's like some me stuff. Like, I'll overachieve. I'll do it twice.
I went hardcore because some people were doing it as books that they'd enjoyed that were with the letter that corresponded with the letter of the name of your username, and some were doing it with just a selection of their favorite like 5-star books. So I did both because I was like, well, some of those are different for me. So I did too. Head over to Joanne_listens to books if you want to see what that is.
That is so long. I also love the fact, I will say, I love the fact that you created a second Instagram for it, because I mean, I would love that. I was just about to be like, because I feel like I wouldn't put that. I do have multiple Instagrams. I do have multiple Instagrams, and they've just like died horrible deaths, or I had to go like super private. That I don't post on the one they're super private because I'm like, no one's even engaging. What's even the point? But I love the fact that you've done that, because I feel like I'm like, yeah, I got this beer Instagram. And then I feel like all it's turned into in the last, like, I don't know, 6 months plus has just been me just reblogging it, like the podcast clips. And then like anything else goes in my stories. But like when I say anything else goes in my stories, I mean like anything else goes in my stories. Like,
that's what stories are for.
Oh, there's a dog. There's a great algorithm that came up on my reels. There's something with food. It's all in my thing. It's not just this. It's actually
succulent dinosaur pots.
Rarely to the tune of someone shittily playing Jurassic Park. That was the one that I'm the most proud of that I think I've ever done to date. It was a really good one.
It was really good.
I was actually, that's only 9 out of 10 because I couldn't find the clip of the guy going, "Welcome to Jurassic Park." Because if I found that and then it went into the shitty flute, that's a top 10 for me.
Yeah. I mean, there's always room for improvement, right?
Yeah, that's for next time.
Right, the synopsis of this book. In case you haven't seen it, don't know what it's about, here you go. From the ancient Sumerian beer goddess to black South African microbrewers today, a page-turning history of women and drink. This is the forgotten history of women making, serving, and drinking alcohol. Drink has always been at the centre of social rituals and cultures worldwide, and women have been at the heart of its production and consumption. So why did drinking become gendered? How have patriarchies tried to erase and exclude women from industries they've always led, and how have women fought back? And why are things from bars to whiskey considered masculine when without women they may not exist? With whip-smart insight and boundless curiosity, Girly Drinks unveils distillers, brewers, drinkers and bartenders with a vital role in the creation and consumption of alcohol, from Cleopatra, Catherine the Great and the real Veuve Clicquot to Chinese poets, medieval nuns and prohibition bootleggers. Mallory O'Meara's fun and fascinating history dismantles the long-standing myth that drink is a male tradition. Now, readers everywhere can discover each woman celebrated in this book and proudly have what she's having. Because I'll have what she's having.
I love that. If anyone's wondering who Mallory O'Meara is as well, so we've got like if this is something that you've not heard about, all I can say is like we've got links. We can put a link to the Goodreads so you can look at the book. We'll put links to her website. We've I said about the book and beer pairing chapter and beer pair or drink pairing that was on the website. There was also, I found a Spotify playlist that she had created, so nice. That was awesome. So you can listen to that. It includes some of the people that are talked about in the book, so like I might not touch upon some of these people, so I think it's okay. So Give Me a Pigfoot and a Bottle of Beer by Bessie Smith. Bessie Smith's awesome. Lots of really good, just really thematic like playlists as well there, so we can put a link to that. It's on Hearst Publishers website, so we can link to that, which that link then gives you the official playlist. So just a bit about who Mallory O'Meara is, for anyone that maybe doesn't know, just pulled directly from her website. Mallory is an award-winning and best-selling author and historian. She lives with her 2 cats in the mountains near Los Angeles, where she is at work on her next non-fiction book. Really excited to know what that one is, which is Daughter of Daring, the trick-riding, train-leaping, road-racing life of Helen Gibson, Hollywood's first stunt woman, which that sounds awesome. Cool. And that's due, it looks like, potentially February 2025. But let's not stop there. Past books that she's written as well that sound so awesome. So her first book was Lady from the Black Lagoon, Hollywood Monsters and the Lost Legacy of Millicent Patrick, which I will easily get that and read that because that sounds awesome. So yeah, that won a 2019 SCIBA award for biography, the Rondo 2019 Book of the Year award, and was nominated for Hugo and Locus awards. And Girly Drinks was her second book, and it was released in October 2021. So it won a James Beard Award, which I actually know what a James Beard Award is. So there we go. Like, you know how some of them, like, but you know what I mean? Like, sometimes there's awards and I go, I feel really stupid because I don't know what that is. I've heard of a Hugo, but like the SCIPA is like, I don't know those. I feel really dumb. But I do know what a James Beard Award is. So awesome. And was nominated for a 2022 Spirited Award. Sorry, my brain was like Spirited Away, my favorite anime. That's great. And then she's got her third book, Girls Make Movies, which is co-created with cartoonist Jen Vaughn, and that was released in the spring of 2023. That's won some awards as well. So I want to read all of those books. All of them. And
add them to the TBR.
Yeah. And she also has been doing a weekly podcast since 2017. It's a literary podcast called Reading Glasses. So if that's, I feel like, Jo, that's up your alley if you don't already listen to it.
The thing is, if I'm listening to a podcast, I'm not listening to a book. So
that's true. And that's my problem, is that's why I don't read enough books, is because I just feel like if I sit down to physically read, I go, oh, there's a million other things I need to be doing. And I love reading, used to read all the time. And then something happened in my brain where I was like, no, I don't have time, can't do that. So now I listen to audiobooks because it's so much easier. I can listen to it on the go when I'm driving, everything else. I think the struggle I had with this book was because I wanted to make notes about it. So I had so many long trips I was doing that would have been perfect, but I was driving. So I couldn't exactly be like, and let's make a bookmark there and write this comment down, unless it was like hands-free, which that was not an option. I'm gutted because that would have been perfect for that. So there'll be other books, maybe these other books that I can listen to in the car while I'm driving, and that would be great. But
yeah, if you have been here a while, then you'll know that I recommended this a lot on a lot of episodes last year after I'd read it. And it also was in my 2023 book bracket. So I was choosing doing a bracket to work out what my favourite book was. I think this one might have come fourth.
How did you go about creating a bracket?
Oh, so I picked
how do you even know
for each. I haven't got my journal up here because I could have shown you my one for this year. So each month I'll pick a book of the month, and then I've got a bracket laid out. And so it's like January against February, March against April, and then they go in together, and then gradually we'll just go down to the final one. Yeah, I think this was fourth. Slayers was number 1. Bloody Fool for Love was 2. A Witch's Guide to Fake Dating a Demon was 3, and then Girly Drinks was 4th. So it only missed out a little bit.
Oh.
Yeah, I enjoy book bracket. Again, my book bracket is on my Instagram if you want to go see it.
Well, there you go. You need to go follow that. And there's also we can also post a link to if that wasn't satisfying enough to know more about Mallory O'Meara. I mean, like I said, she looks like a badass. Yeah, she seems like a badass. Like all around somebody that I'd be like, please be my friend, and she'd be like, no, please leave me alone, and I'd be like, but please. But there's also a Kansas City Library public library post where they did a Q&A with her. I won't read through all those, but if you want to know, like, it starts off with just going, this is how I know that I'd be like, please be my friend, and then she'd be like, no sweetie, she's way too cool for me. The first thing is just how many hits of Buffalo Trace O'Meara's favorite bourbon is what it says, went into this project, and her answer was just many unaccountable bottles. That is question number 1. And yeah, so it's definitely worth the read through. So we will share that, so you can have a read through to get to know more about the book and her and everything else in between. So that brings us on to the book. I feel like, when it comes to how much did we know about the book and the topic beforehand, I mean, I knew about the book because you had mentioned it a lot of times, and I had seen it in passing, and other people had recommended it to me and posted about it and talked about it. In regards to the topic, I would say, I think it's just like this book in itself is within our pocket of the craft community.
Yeah.
It's quite iconic. It's quite a big deal. So I think that's definitely why I knew about it. In terms of the topics, like I think I knew a little bit about a lot, but not, what do they say? Is jack of all trades, master of none. I think like I knew little bits about a lot of stuff, but maybe not necessarily when it came to niche details about the beer itself or drinking itself, alcohol itself, and the women's specific involvement in some of it. Other than what I think I know just naturally from the community that I'm in, if that makes sense. What about you?
So before I read this, I feel like there's like a little like set of 3 books that I would now recommend together. And the first is A Woman's Place is in the Brew House by Tara Nurin. And so I've read that. And then this came, I can't remember whether someone recommended this to me or I saw someone had read it, or it was naturally a recommendation because I'd read A Woman's Place in the Brew House. But I then read this and it kind of expanded on some bits from that. And then next, you should also read The Devils Are in the Draft Lines because that expands on some of the bits in this. And of course, we're in it and we're just going to keep telling you that we're
immortalised.
That's like a 3
forever.
That's like a 3-book trilogy that are not linked, but I think they should be, and you should just you should drink along and read all of those.
I would love it if all the books have that had that same thing though of like what to drink for each chapter. Yeah. Like that is awesome because that could be, I feel like what I will say, I wish I'd discovered that sooner because I might have sat down to actually read as opposed to audiobook, and I'll tell you why, and this is an idea for anyone that wants to read it. You can have this one free of charge from my incredible mind. When you look at that and you go, oh, the first one's mead, you just go, I'm going to sit and I'm going to dedicate 1 hour max, and it's not even going to take you a full hour. You're going to go, I'm going to dedicate 1 mead glassful to read this chapter. And then that's all it takes. You go, that's my one nightly, my 1 drink in the evening, or maybe for feeling bold, some of the ones where it's like beer, you could probably do like one after another, and you can just take it slow, read a chapter, have a drink. And that is your relaxation time. Maybe, I don't know, if you're into like bath beers and reading, like that's like, have a bath, read a chapter and drink the corresponding beer. Put the playlist on. Like,
yeah, in the background.
I feel like I would have 100% done that had I discovered them not at the point that I'd already listened to the book.
Yeah. And I think the thing that I really like about Girly Drinks is like we're in the beer space. We're beer peeps. We're assuming that if you're listening to us, you're probably beer peeps too. The thing about this is it's the history of women and alcohol. So it's not just beer. Yeah. So, there's bits of it that I was like, yeah, I knew that. And then you get into other bits and you get into like sake and bartending and, whiskey and bourbon production and rum production. And women have been in all of it. They like to tell you that they haven't been, but they have. And I really enjoyed that expansion of that knowledge because I knew the bits about early Sumeria and things like that and about certain people, or I had an understanding, maybe a higher level understanding than the book goes into of some of these people. But then finding out about the other alcohols was really interesting. Hence why I have a cocktail inspired beer for the day,
and why I have an actual cocktail that is now basically reddish pink. No, actually, I mean it tastes great. I'm not gonna lie, it does actually taste very good. The grenadine colouring though is aggressive, but I love the taste of grenadine. I grew up on drinking Shirley Temples as a kid, which is just basically ginger ale and grenadine, but it makes you got to be like, oh, look at me, I'm having a specialty cocktail as a kid. But like literally they've just sugared you up in addition to caffeine. And you're like, I'm flying high. And that's kind of what this reminds me of as well, which also reminds me like to some of the later points in the book of like certain eras where I feel like Shirley Temples would have been a hit. But yeah, no, completely agree with all of that really. I've got the other books. Obviously, I've got Devil in the Draft Lines, but I also have A Woman's Place in the Brew House, and that was the first one I got, and I really wanted to start reading that, but I don't think I could find an audiobook of it. And I ended up finding the audiobook of Girly Drinks, and I was like, oh, you know what, let's do that. And then I was gonna read A Woman's Place is in the Brew House, but I was like, no, we probably want to do that for book club. So I was like, I don't want to start reading it because I was like, if I start reading it, then I'm really putting myself in a bad position. So yeah, but no, I'm like you, like when we covered the Mesopotamian bits and Egyptian bits, like I love Egyptian history as well, and like that kind of stuff. Like I find that really cool. So gone to lots of museums and learned about the Mesopotamian Egyptian stuff and like all that. But I feel like it was really interesting hearing about certain characters in a different way, and also hearing about the alcohol side that you don't necessarily learn. And I cannot wait, like I just can't wait to talk about some of the points of like the insights that I got after reading this book. But if you were to describe the book in one word, how would you describe it? I want to know what word you'd use.
Inspiring.
That's good.
Yeah.
I just wrote in all caps, preach.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Like I was like, if I had to say one word about this book, I'd be like, preach. Like that is because that's how I felt like when I was listening to a lot of it. It was like she'd be saying things and I'd be like, oh, preach. I found the book quite easy to get into myself. Like, what do you think? It was relatively?
Yeah, I think it was easy. I like I think there are points where she kind of starts talking about one person and then kind of goes into kind of the history around the time, or it can be a little bit meandering, and which isn't necessarily a bad thing because it kind of keeps your attention. But there are points where like she starts talking about Catherine the Great and then she goes off and talks about something else and then she comes back around to Catherine the Great, like to round out what the original point and maybe the chapter. I think some people might struggle with that, but the information is so engaging that it doesn't really matter.
I think it also depends on like how your brain works, because I know like that is 100% how my brain works. Like when I have conversations with people, we have my manager and I do this all the time because we are both very similar, like brained in that way. It's like we'll have a conversation which will lead to another conversation which will lead to another conversation because I'm like, oh, this makes me think of this, so let me tell you that, and then it all loops back around. Like I the way that I function in terms of like how I do things and how my brain works is very much like I think about the order that makes the most sense to tell something in, or like if I've got a set list of chores, I'm like, well, it makes sense to do that one first because if I'm moving something from a room to a room, it makes sense for me to do that first. And then when I'm moving between the rooms, I can pick that thing up and move it to another room. And that's just like how my brain works. So I think that style of storytelling really worked for me. But the one thing I will say that made it difficult in that regard was when I'd go back to listen to the clips that I made in Audible, because that's how I chose to use it. If anybody else is like wanting to do something similar for their book club, like if you've got a book club you're running and you want to do Girly Drinks as well, the pain point is like you clip a part of it and then when you go back it gives you like quite a breadth of recording. And because she talks about so many things under the same topic and you can only go forward and backwards by 30 seconds, I was like constantly like, oh, what was the thing I wanted? I made a note on it like no. And then I was worried that I'd gone to the wrong place because I was like, she's talking about something different. And then I was like, oh, nope, we're good. I just need to do a few 30 seconds.
This is not a difficulty for physical book readers who can just highlight the actual bit. Also, are you for or against writing in books?
I was going to ask you this actually. So I was going to ask you this offline and then I went, no, I'm going to wait and ask on the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really hard because every fiber of my being says I'm so against it that I cannot, and I can't bring myself to do it. And maybe that's part of the reason why I was like, oh, I guess I don't have enough time to do it. Better write it in a Google Note. Bye. And I actually ordered mechanical pencils because I thought at least if I was mechanical penciling, I could erase the mechanical pencil. I'm not against it. Like I would buy a book that has had writing in it, but like I think I would struggle to write in it myself because something about it, even though it's love, like that makes it more loved. I'm also like, oh no, I can't do that. Why? What about you?
I think if it's an academic book, then it's okay. I don't think I would have written in this. I'd put post-its in, or like highlight with like little coloured tabs and things. I like these ones that are kind of like see-through.
I like that as well, yeah.
For those that are listening, I've got these coloured see-through ones poking out of the book. There's no real rhyme or reason for the colour they are. That was just the ones I had.
What have you done for the directions? Because anyone that's listening can't see, but you've got some coming out the top, some coming out the side. I like it. That is visually appealing.
I pulled this off of the shelf just now and went, why did I do that? Because I did this quite a while ago when we first talked about it. And I was like, I wonder why I did that. And then I had to flick through, and the ones that are at the top mark kind of a whole page that I was interested in, and the ones on the side I think I started doing just because lines. It was particular, like I've put it next to the point that I wanted to read, so that's why I've got them in weird directions. But yeah, I don't think I'm not a writer in books. I see all these people that like it, like, and in novels,
stresses me out.
Not. Absolutely not in a novel. Like I see these people that are like, like they're highlighting bits, like underlining, writing their own little notes and things. And I'm like, that is not for me.
I think it would stress me out because I think if it's not like if the line's not straight enough and it doesn't look nice enough, I'd be like, I fucked it, and then I'd be like I've got to get a new book.
Little like they've got all that, like, and they get their book out and they've got their tabs and they've got their pens, and I'm like, what you doing? Like, you're writing in that book, and like little squiggly lines or circles around things, and I'm like,
well, that's it. So you've book club before. No. So I have book club before, like once or twice. Well, I was in a book club with other like expats, and I think I only actually I bought like maybe 3 of the books, and we only actually had one session I was able to go.
Yeah.
And that was when we read the book that most infuriated me. I had a lot of like just angry notes on it, but I chose to use like index cards to write notes, and I'd like write my note, like when I wanted to jot something, I'd write my note down there and then I'd like shove it in the page.
Yeah.
So that way I could kind of like get out my thoughts that I wanted to say. I know it's wasting more paper. If I had a better digital way to do it, I would. I mean, I guess I could. If I was sat at a PC, I could go page number, blah, 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 and then I could write what it was. But in my brain, I was not at the PC. I was actively removing myself to avoid distractions. So I'd write down on like you could use recycled paper or whatever if you want as well. And then I'd like put it in the page. Do you have any, I know obviously we're meant to be talking about Girly Drinks, we will in a minute, but I think this is all really important for anyone that wants to do their own type of book club. Do you have a preferred way of taking notes for when you do? But I know you've done book clubs before.
I don't really take notes.
But like, what if it's like this situation, right? And you go, oh, I'm reading this and I actually have to go back and reference it in a month's time.
I'd put post-its in. I wouldn't write into it. Yeah, I'd put a post-it in. And I like these little tiny like slither ones, the little marker ones are quite good now. But I think in the past I've always used post-its. You can get ones that are like see-through, like big ones that are see-through, and you can put on the page so you can write your note over the top of it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Afterwards, I've not used them, so I can't comment on how good they are. But obviously, you've got to, if you stick it on the page and it's a see-through one, you've got to be careful of where the edges are so you don't write off of it.
Well,
they're like these ones where they're that slightly kind of acetate type stuff. So you should kind of, if you're careful, you can see where the edge of it is.
But then I wonder, like, what's the size? Because I think, like, part of it is, you'd have to then put another sticky note hanging out, I guess.
Yeah, it depends on how many notes you want to write. Yeah, I don't think I would write in the book. I think I'd use post-it notes or a bit of paper. As we're talking about book clubs, if anyone is interested in, I'm in a book club that you can find on Facebook that is actually beer related. The books aren't beer related, but the group is. So there's Crafty Beer Girls. It's not Crafty Beer Girls. Hang on, now I'm going to have to look it up.
Well, I was just about to join. I was like, let me join.
So it is Craft Beer Girls, Books and Beer. So Craft Beer Girls are social groups. They're in the US, and they have kind of chapters all around the US. And there's a main Craft Beer Girls group, and then they have offshoots for different things. So there's the Craft Beer Girls, Books and Beer.
There's beer in bites. What is this?
Yeah, there's a food one. Yeah, there's all different ones. So I'm in the books and beer one.
Oh, I'm just in requesting them all now.
You just kind of share. People can just share what books they're reading. Like you often get people like, I'm at the bar reading my book. Here's my beer. You know, people pair beers and books together and share them in there. But once a month, so each month we have a different book. That's the book club book. And so this year so far, January was a thriller. February was Fantasy February. March was... What was March? Oh, Memoir March.
Oh, I like that. That's fun.
Then we had April
Love a good memoir.
April Hates was a good one. So people had to put in the books that they hated. And we chose one from the books that people hated. May was Young Adult May. And June is going to be LGBTQ month.
Nice.
So poll goes up. You can add in, but like they'll put a poll up with a selection, but then everyone can add in some extras. Do a poll at the end of the month, and we pick, and the book comes from that. And then there's a Zoom at the end of the month to discuss the previous one. Now I've not been able to get onto any of the Zooms because it's mainly an American group, so they're always at like.
Well, there's a Europe one as well because I just saw this. Yeah, Craft Beer Girls Europe. I've just requested. I am pending.
All right. Well, I mean, it's not necessarily a book club one, but
and there's crafts and crafts.
But that one's good. That's a good one that I like doing, and it's online. So I mean, you can just put your comments in the Zoom page and share it that way, and we'll just discuss it and stuff like that. So I enjoy that one. That I've had some good choices out of that I wouldn't necessarily have picked myself, but have been really good. It's just nice. It helps you to read more widely, and then you can pair a beer with it. And then I'm currently in a virtual book club, a bit more locally, that I've just started in, and the first book was okay.
The first book was okay.
Yeah, it was okay, but it was called End of Story. It was another thriller. I'm reading a lot of thrillers this year for some reason. And it was okay. It was the writing style was a bit off, but the twists at the end, like it's long, but it's not crazy long, but it was like it could have been shorter. I think there's a lot of characters, and you've got to work out who everybody is and how they interact. The style was kind of a homage to mystery writers like Arthur Conan Doyle and Agatha Christie, so it was an interesting writing style. But there's like over 100 chapters, but they're all quite short chapters. But it takes until, like, I was reading it and I was like, well, I kind of want to, I am engaged with the story. I kind of want to know what happens. Like from about chapter 80 onwards, you're like, oh my God, I didn't see that. What? Oh my God, I didn't see that coming. Like literally, I was literally like gasping out loud.
Love a good twist.
Like, I was like, I got to read the next chapter because I need to know what happens now. Now everything's going to happen. So that kind of bumped the score of the book up for me. I think I only gave it a 4. I was tempted to give it a 4.5, but I think I only gave it a 4 out of 5 in the end because you have
the twist
to
got
the rest
you,
of the
but
because the twist got. I was like, that twist. I was like, yeah, but remember the rest of it was a little bit of a slog. But if you're interested in thrillers, End of Story by AJ Flynn was quite a good one. Absolutely nothing to do with this book, but it was to do with it.
We got down a book time. The worst thing I could have done is talk to you about books.
Oh yeah, I'm taking you down a Bookstagram hole. Sorry, everybody.
Well, bring it back to this book. What was your favourite part about it? Because I think we can go through and, like, I don't know if the best way is kind of go chapter by chapter of like some of our favourite parts. I've got some prompting questions, some general topics of themes, that the stuff that I noted down in the book that stood out to me. But I guess to start, like, what was your favourite part of the book, or who was your favourite person to cover?
I really liked when we got a bit further through the book and it was people that I didn't necessarily know stuff about. So like I said, when we got into the bartenders, when we got into the whiskey and rum makers, but also I was very interested in, I'm going to find chapter 13, the Joyce Spence anniversary blend, but how it started talking about the 80s and 90s and how it then got into like girl power and ladettes.
Yeah, that is what I thought was really interesting, because I don't think I'd ever heard of a ladette, in a serious way. I thought it was a joke.
No, that was a real thing. And that was, the 90s, the late 90s was kind of, I turned, the kind of mid to late 90s was kind of my teen years, and all of that sort of thing was very much in the forefront of me when I first started going out and drinking alcohol. So that
were you a ladette?
I was not a ladette, no. My friend was, though. Because a ladette, if you air quotes, ladette was Sporty Spice, right? And so we and I don't know if I've told you this.
No,
I've dressed up as a Spice Girl at least twice.
Oh yeah, you have told me that. You have told me.
And so, the first time, both, one time was for charity, and one was I was made to do it for work. So we did. We'd often do things at school for Red Nose Day and Children in Need, and then there was a year where the Spice Girls did the charity single for Red Nose Day. So me and my friends dressed up as the Spice Girls to raise money for Red Nose Day, and I was Posh Spice because I had a bob.
Solid reason. If it helps, okay. So my next question, again, nothing to do with this book, but now I feel like we've gone down this rabbit hole. I need to ask you the question. If you had to identify as one of the which Spice Girl do you feel that you would identify the most with? Just really you're Posh Spice because of the bob.
I mean, I dressed up the first time I dressed up, I was Posh Spice because of the bob, and the second time I was Ginger because that was the only one that was left, and they needed somebody to be Ginger, and we had a really terrible ginger. Do not underestimate when I say a really terrible ginger wig that I had to wear. It was terrible. It was we did. It was when I was on ships. We did Hey Mr. Producer, which is sections of a whole bunch of musicals, including Les Mis, and it was the ex Thénardier wig. So that
means nothing to me. Literally nothing.
The really gross woman who had literally that her Madame Thénardier is just repulsive, and her wig is totally backcombed and disgusting and gross, and it's like a bird's nest. This is the old wig for that that we had in the back of the cupboard, and it happened to be Ginger, and I conditioned the shit out of it, and I combed it all out because it was the only red wig that we could find, and we needed someone to be Ginger for Ginger. And so I was just right, we're gonna have to do this, because it was a very last minute. The cruise director and the assistant cruise director was we need people we have to have people dress up as the Spice Girls. I don't know why we specifically needed the Spice Girls, but they were insistent that they needed people to be the Spice Girls, and it had to be 5 of us. And none of the others would do it, and it was two of our singers, 2 of our dancers, and me dressed up as the Spice Girls. And this was the only place we couldn't find a red wig anywhere. I had to fix this one, and it was horrendous. But I still pulled in it, which is crazy. I'm not joking. When I actually turned around to him and went, "Have you looked at what I look like right now? What are you doing?"
You know what? I respect it.
And he literally went, "Well, I've always liked Ginger Spice." And I was like, But look at the wig. Look at it. Look. Hilarious.
But which one? I
still don't know which one.
You don't know which one. You don't go that one's, because I feel growing up, we all had what we're that's mine.
No, I feel like I've got elements of several different Spice Girls.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I'm just picturing someone being
I'll show you the picture later.
I think you did show me the picture. Yeah. I don't think it looked that terrible.
Oh no, it was bad. It was really bad.
I don't even remember how we got on the Spice Girls, but then you started talking about the Spice Girls. Oh, ladettes.
Because that was one of my favourite chapters, because because I really I was like, yeah, this was it was during the time that I was starting to get into alcohol and going out and drinking, and so yeah, that really resonated with me, that era. I do think it would be something that, like, kind of 1990s UK was probably something that you wouldn't have been necessarily aware of.
No, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I've read books and stuff where it's painted pictures, and I'm like, oh, I get it.
Now I'm having this moment where this was my life, but actually, it's history in this book, and I'm like, oh god.
What I thought was really cool though was like a Pué had a chat. Like, there's a whole chapter on a Pué, and I thought that was awesome.
Girl gets into it. She's in all the books. She's in all 3 books.
I literally, I'm just listening to it, and I didn't see the chapters in advance, and then all of a sudden they the way that it started, I was like, oh my god.
I love a Pué.
That was literally awesome. But I would say probably my favorite part of the whole book, which is the person that has inspired the drink that I made. Gertrude Cleo Lithgow is my favorite, the queen of the bootleggers. So that was easily hands down the coolest part to learn about in this whole book. They mentioned, it was mentioned about her autobiography, which is called The Bahama Queen, the autobiography of Gertrude Cleo Lithgow. And I was like, it's obviously it's not a biography. And I was like, I want to hear about her. She was such a badass. Yeah. The shit that she would say and do and just not give a fuck about. I was like, I want to learn more about her, and I want to learn about her via her autobiography where she tells about herself, because I bet that is awesome. And so I was looking for it. I could find nothing, right? Nothing that was a normal priced. I messaged you right away, I really just want to learn more about what this book has done. It's taught me about people that I really wanted to learn about, but I'm like, I have no way of doing this. I couldn't find any books that were relatively easy priced or digital. I was like, I don't really like digital copies myself. I like physical copies. Couldn't even find a digital copy. The cheapest one I could find was Amazon UK. It was used. Amazon US. It was a used copy, $80, and that was not including shipping. Some of them went all the way up to 120 whatever dollars, and I was like, is this real life? You could barely find them as they were, and they were all used copies, no new copies. And I just sat and I thought, we live in a digital age. The book exists. Why aren't we digitizing it so that other people can, if it's not in print anymore, why aren't we digitizing it so people can to preserve it,
but also
but to preserve it, because what happens if all those books go? That was shocking to me, and I was gutted because I really wanted to learn about her, from her own perspective. So if anybody knows where I can get copies of that, or just in general, any books or podcasts that can be recommended about her or some of the other people that are similar to her, please let me know, because that was probably the person that I most was 100% want to learn more about. So yeah, that was my favorite part. I guess we should probably also, most importantly, touch upon, I feel like this might be a spoiler, but we should touch upon it anyways, about why, where the girly drinks came from, because I think that's a pretty interesting conversation. So when we talk about what the first girly drink was, it's really, really interesting in the sense of, so it starts off sort of taking you through ancient Greece and the symposiums, right? So you talk about that, which really interesting. I want to point out what I observed, and it only came to me as I was writing up notes today. We still call major lectures symposiums. And that's really interesting because the first girly drink was not at a symposium. And I can tell you for why. It's because women weren't allowed at symposiums. So I find that's very interesting.
That we haven't moved very far.
No, we'll talk about that in a minute, because we've got so many things that resonated with, I could see comparisons. But yeah, ancient Greece, you had symposiums, and it was strictly men allowed there. It was a formal intellectual drinking party that is quoted as being for the privileged free man, which was at the time, according to the book, about a fifth of the population. And they would sit around and they'd drink wine, which was really funny because they were drinking diluted wine, and the way she explains it is so apparently it's more to do with the quality of it, because it was really not the best quality at that time. But what I thought was really funny was it's like drinking undiluted wine was considered barbaric. And that's what I think is right. And it was likened to, if you were to drink undiluted wine at that time, it would be akin to chugging vodka. And like a strong drink was considered equal parts water and wine, which is what I think is just hilarious. And it also sounds like orange wine was doing its thing back then as well, because there was the 3 types of wine: the red, the white, and the amber. And so that's basically, so it started there. And then it basically, another point that was interesting actually about that, while we're on it, is that hilariously, there's no stigma for men drinking in ancient Greece, even if it was outside the symposium. Wine was considered a manly drink, and she talks about how there's only really a stigma if you're not drinking, because they drank for everything, like sacking. It says sacking cities and making oaths. Oaths sealed with wine were considered stronger and weightier, effectively, is what the book said. And I would like to propose that we go back to sealing deals with drinks. Like, I think every deal we make should be sealed with a drink. That is the motion that I'm putting forward for proposal.
Girl, some of us have got to drive.
That just means that you just got to be more manly in terms of ancient Greece. You got to get on that horse and go. I don't know. I'm guessing that. It does not say. So that was sort of the ancient Grecian times, which then when we move into Roman times, there was the convivium, which is in Rome, and women were eventually allowed to join that, as opposed to in the symposiums. But drinking, like the extent of it was very dependent. It was very circumstantial, like who was the host, what were their preferences, what was the status of the women, like were they a higher status so they could, like, they'd probably potentially be more welcome, and even then they weren't drinking the same alcohol as men. So it's interesting because even then it's like, oh yeah, you're invited to the party but you're not an equal. I mean, I guess so they had more. So the laws themselves, it's described as the laws themselves are more laxed, but the societal norms weren't. So there was still an idea that like women couldn't drink the same amount as men, shouldn't drink the same amount as men. You can participate, but not to an equal degree as the men can. And the women were expected to drink passum, which is a watered down, sweeter, raisin-based wine, which you know how I feel about raisin. But I do like a barley wine now, so so I guess that depends. So that's fine. But that was, for the purposes of this book and the historical findings, the world's first girly drink as such, because that was the direct distinguishing mark between those stronger, manlier drinks and the weaker, sweeter, girlier drinks. How do you feel about that?
We just like
maybe it tasted better though. So maybe jokes on them. We were like, actually, this tastes nicer.
Like, but still, like, why? Like, there doesn't need to be a distinction. Why did there need to be a distinction? And how it's still prevalent now that women should be drinking the sweeter, more fruit-based drink. Like, that. How has that prevailed for so long?
It's interesting as well, because when you think about it, obviously we had the article that came out about Guinness and not Guinness, stouts, and how it's like, oh, there's more record number women drinking stouts, and it's probably because there was no, like, as much as people want to say that there was statistics and research on it, like there was no statistics and research on that I could see in that article that actually said women prefer sweeter drinks. Like, statistics show that women are drinking more stouts because they're sweeter now. Like, I didn't see any actual evidence in that. It was just, it came across more like an opinion piece. Why am I tangenting on this? It's because of the fact that it's like, if we look at nowadays, people go, oh, women like these sweeter drinks. But when we look back to ancient Rome and think, and like outings like the convivium, we weren't drinking sweeter wines because we were like, we actually really like the sweet taste. It was like, that's what you're allowed to have.
That's what you're allowed, yeah.
And I thought that was just like, yeah, that was something that reading that was really interesting, because it does feel like that kind of still prevails in that sense of like that. It feels like that's an ongoing myth that's perpetuated. Like even since the ancient times, women have been drinking sweeter drinks by choice, like as if that's what we had chosen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a thing, isn't there, that like physiologically, supposedly women are more prone to bitterness, and it's supposed to be a holdover from when we were the women were the food providers. Men did the hunter gathering, women did the cooking and preparing. So they would eat part of it, and so their bodies reacted to if there was extra bitterness in there that could mean poisonous or bad for you. So there's a little bit of school of thought that the reason that women are more sensitive to bitterness is because that's still left over from those days where that developed from. That doesn't mean that all women don't like bitterness.
Well, I was going to say my argument
slightly more sensitive to
my argument is, and I'm a person that is sensitive to bitterness. My argument is a sensitivity or an additional like a person that is more perceptive to a taste. That doesn't mean you don't like it.
Yeah,
it means that you pick it up more, you're more sensitive to it, you'll notice it more. But that doesn't necessarily go, oh, I don't like that taste. So that's why I was like, anytime someone would reference that and say, oh, women are more sensitive to bitterness, like, yeah, and that's, I'm sensitive to a lot of it. It doesn't mean I don't like that thing just because I can pick it up quite well.
Just means we're good tasters.
Yeah, got excellent taste.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was a lot of points in the book where I felt like it was really interesting to see how that had like lasting effect. Like I could still see things that were very similar or very different, or like very driven from that historical element. But one thing I do want to say, slightly separate to that, the very start of the book, when it talks about the Venus of Lawsall, that she has a quote in the book that absolutely killed me. So what is the Venus of Lawsall like? Look it up. It's spelled Venus like the planet of Laussel. So it's a 2,500-year-old carving from France that is believed to be the oldest depiction of drinking. So it's a lady that's got her hand on her stomach and holding what is believed to be a drinking horn, probably filled with mead, they would assume. There's speculation also that she's pregnant, like that's why she's holding her stomach. And there's a point at which where the comment is like, oh, rude to make that assumption. And I was thinking, okay, I can understand how someone might be able to make that assumption, because that tends to be the where your hand is in artwork like that tends to kind of be the symbol. When I actually saw the photo, because I didn't have the book, so I looked it up, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I mean. I wouldn't necessarily assume that. It's like, that's a weird thing to assume, but okay. And yeah, so my favorite part was that some male historians were so just like mind blown by the idea that a lady could be like drinking at that point in history. I guess maybe projecting current views on the past, I don't know, but they just assumed it was a lady not holding a drinking horn but a musical instrument, but she was holding it the wrong way, like just incorrectly holding.
You can't even hold an instrument the right way around.
Incorrect. It's a musical instrument that she is holding incorrectly. And that killed me, because the quote that she put in there was, imagine being so staunch in your belief that women aren't drinkers that somebody would take the time to immortalize the world's worst horn blower into the side of a cliff.
Right. That they took their time. Yeah, that didn't take 5 minutes.
No,
like that took a long time to choose that image and carve it in.
I audibly laughed. And to be fair, okay, if it was because she was pregnant, that almost stacks up even more about why she might be drinking as opposed to anything else. Because when we, through various points in the book, it talks about alcohol being used as a pain relief or for healing medicinal purposes, not so much healing but medicinal purposes, like for period pains, childbirth pains, like all that kind of stuff, which respect, that's I mean, who hasn't been like, I'm in pain and this might help me feel better? To a healthy degree. I'm not talking about unhealthy degree. But
drink responsibly, everybody.
But yeah, I've definitely been like, oh my God, I'm cramping. It hurts. Like, you know what would help? Just a little bit of alcohol. Just that would make it feel that much better. There's a reason that back in the day they used to be like, oh, put a bit of spirits and like whiskey or whatever and wipe it on a baby's gums when they're teething. Like, I'm not promoting that and saying that should be done, but there's a reason we have
better ways now. We've got, medical science has moved on since then. But back in the day,
yeah. But that's what it is, like the idea of like historically that has been the purpose. So the idea that it's like, oh no, it couldn't be a drinking horn.
Possibly be drinking.
It's a musical horn that's being held wrong, and they took so long to carve that into the side of the mountain. Like, can you imagine though if we were wrong and actually that was just a lady holding a musical instrument the wrong way, and they immortalized her because they were like, what an idiot.
What's she doing? Yes.
That's like, actually, it's not the first photo of somebody drinking, of a woman drinking. It's like a bullying, the first known case of bullying. And they're like, gonna get us so good. We're gonna put this on the side of the mountain. Everyone's gonna see it.
I also really enjoyed the chapter about Cleopatra because I've always enjoyed Cleopatra as,
same.
A strong, powerful woman that people like to bitch about. Like, mate, she did her thing and she did it well. And the fact that she was also a drinker and that annoyed people as well. I'm like, yes, that is my girl Cleo. She is drinking and she's enjoying sweet wines with honey and pomegranate juice and a little bit of spice. That's my girl.
I did put down as well, like around that, because around the Cleopatra stuff in general, I'm trying to find the note specifically that I made about it, because so part of what I wrote down as just something that I thought was interesting that gave me pause to think was, was it the fact that, so at the end they sort of like made her out to be this horrible evil seductress, they destroyed all of her likeness after her death, and part of me was like, is it just because, like, is that kind of stuff the reason why they reported that she wasn't attractive or anything? Like, I feel like that was like the original negging of like, because they didn't like it, they were like, oh, you know what, she was ugly anyways.
100%.
She was gross, she was ugly, she was dumb. Let's destroy her likeness because no one needs to look at that in history. But actually, it's just because they were like,
whore.
Yeah,
she was a whore because she wouldn't bow down to us.
It's like, she's a fugly slut, Cleopatra, and we don't like her.
Right, because she did her thing and she was bloody good at it. Yeah. Going back to the chapter that I enjoyed, chapter 13, Joyce Spence, the Queen of Rum, going from one queen to another.
Just queens throughout this book, really. This is a book of queens. It should just be called Girly Drinks, Book of Queens.
Queens who are actual queens, people who have been named queens. Everyone is just a goddamn queen in this book. They're great.
Yeah, you're a queen if you read the book.
Yes. Joyce Spence, she created Appleton Estates 250th anniversary blend.
That was awesome.
Rum. It was her first ever rum, and it was amazing. Like, everyone was like, "Oh my god, what well-trained person and person that has been making rum for ages made this rum." No, it was Joyce Spence.
It was I. Bamboozled you.
Yeah. She was amazing. She was a female master blender. That was cool.
That was super cool reading that as well. Yeah. Very inspiring in that, and like not massively ancient history.
Right. One of those things where I was like, oh, I've definitely drunk Appleton's rum when I was in like Jamaica and stuff. So
it was interesting. Like, I as much as I really like the history stuff, the newer stuff was like really, really interesting as well, just because it's like, that is, like you said, with the stuff in the UK in the 90s, like, oh, that's something that you can relate even more to, and that you can go, oh, I've seen that, or I know that person, I've heard about that, is pretty cool. Unlike that, I think my favorite parts were the history stuff, because there was so much stuff that I really wish that we'd like bring back. Like the Festival of Hathor, I just want that. Like, why aren't we doing that? Or even like celebrating Dionysus. Like, I don't like the idea of like giving yourself over to Dionysus. But the parties sound awesome. Like, I'm not gonna lie. So we've got the Festival of Hathor. Everyone dresses up, looking as nice as possible. They go to the temple. They drink a lot. They're looking great. They're smelling great. They're feeling great. They go to there. They binge drink. And then, to the point that
I don't feel like we should be promoting binge drinking.
That's what they did, though, and I'm not going to feel ashamed of it. I'm not going to feel ashamed of it. I think we should be able to party as hard as we want. And what I really liked about it is there was no gender disapproval of the drunkenness. Well, they could vom if they wanted because they were like that ill. And like, okay, I'm not promoting giving yourself alcohol poisoning, but my point about why I like it is like there was no stigma on that. If you got so drunk that you threw up, like no one was there going, "What a mess." Did you see, that I don't even know what kind of name would be used back then. Did you see that person absolute state last night? Or, like there was less fear of what could there was less of a fear of like what could happen to you in those like instances. There was less of a beyond physical safety, like psychological safety of there was no, oh my God, what if I look stupid and somebody draws carvings of me to bully me in the side of a mountain as I hold my drinking horn incorrectly? Like there's no element of like, oh, people might think I'm dumb or that I can't hold my alcohol or anything like that. Like people could just go, let loose, have fun. The parties lasted for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. There was live music, there was feasting, there was dancing, there were orgies everywhere. Drinking, like that sounds like.
Fast forward to the 1990s where date rape drugs are predominant, and you need to look up. Like we're not going to talk about stopping the people that are putting drugs in the thing. You just need to be more aware of your drink.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The onus is on you, victim.
Yeah.
Don't be a victim.
Yeah. But this is a more, when people go like, oh, a simpler time. Like that is a simpler time where it's like they didn't have that stigma. One thing that I thought was really interesting though when it comes to the stigmas is that in terms of like men. So the best part as well was like what made me laugh was that like it was saying that basically wine and alcohol would make men tell the truth. And that was what was considered. And like some lawyers practice only while drunk. And what I thought was really funny is like in present day, they now use the alcohol to be like people use alcohol as an excuse for like, oh, I was badly behaved, like me being this way, it wasn't me, I'm not that person, it was alcohol. And it's like, but they were saying that like for men back in the day, like they would be like, oh no, it's you basically tell the truth if you're drinking as well. And that was like a point that I thought was quite interesting as I was scrolling through. But yeah, like stuff like the Festival of Hathor, and I love the phrase be the Kratiok you want to see. That was my favorite. So Kratiok being just someone that they don't know anything about. They don't know when she lived, when she died. They just know that she was relatively rich, I'm guessing because she had a tombstone. And yeah, so she had written on her tomb, I'm a mistress of drunkenness, one who loved a good day, who looked forward to having sex every day, anointed in myrrh and perfumed with lotus scent. And then Mallory wrote, be the Kratiok you want to see. I was like, I think that's how I'm going to live my life from now on. I think it's great. The Dionysus parties, the parties to Hathor, I'm going to be the Kratiok that I want to see.
Yes, girl.
So some of the other bits that I thought were really quite interesting as well had to do with, I guess, the alewives themselves. And I mean, I don't want to talk the thing is, I don't want to talk too much about all this because I want people to go, I want to give people enough, but they go, that sounds really interesting. Let's go read it. But actually, I don't want to jump too far into history. What I will say, a point that I thought was interesting, and I want to know if you had a similar point. So park the alewives for a second. But when there was one point where they talk about Aristotle, she talks about Aristotle and she talks about the fact that he is basically his belief was that women didn't have souls. For me, I was like, what's really interesting is you learn about these prolific and supposedly progressive men in history, such as Aristotle, such as other people. You don't really dig deeper into it. They just go like, look at these amazing things that they philosophized about and the things that they brought to the world and culture and everything else. What they don't talk about in history is how it's like these other thoughts about society and different people within the society. And that's something that I feel that was the point at which the book which prompted me to think a little bit more on it. And I was like, that is something that I wish in school they taught all sides of it. Not because it takes away from the good stuff.
This is the thing, and this goes back to, you know, history is always written by the victors, right? Because, you know, so history generally it's written by the men. Because they were the ones that were in power. And there's this one thing that really made me, one quote from Sandy Toksvig that always really resonated with me when I heard it from her, and it makes me rethink everything now. Because, you know, I did history in school, I did history GCSE, so you're like, yeah, this is what happened, this is how things worked out, blah 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 blah. Sandy Toksvig said when she was at university, they were in a lecture, can't remember what subject it was, but they were talking about, they found this bone and it had 28 notches on it, and they think it was man's first attempt at a calendar. And the lecturer went, however, I don't think that's accurate. I think it's woman's first attempt at a calendar, because who in that time period, you know, back in, you know, we're talking like almost prehistoric kind of era, you know, Neolithic type era, who needed to know a time period of about 28 days? Wasn't men.
Well, yeah, that's interesting. And like, what I'm just
man's first calendar. Man didn't give a shit about how many days there would be in a month. They could do it by the moon.
Yeah, but also, like, I mean, I'm not a historian, I don't know, but also, was there at that point in time, was there a drive to be like, well, there's 12 months and there's roughly X amount of days in a month?
No, but women need to know about 28 days because of their periods.
I know.
Like, why would any?
No, I know women
do.
I know women do, but that's what I'm saying about the like, oh, men could do it by the moon, but would they? Because would they be like,
well, they don't need to.
Oh, it's the 23rd
day. That's the point. They didn't need to, but it's like, oh, man's first attempt at a calendar. When you really dig into it,
when you think about it,
specifically, like man as in people's first attempt at calendar. No, actually, it's probably a woman's, because they were the ones that actually that had something happening that they needed to know and they needed to track. Like, yeah, and that reframed history for me. And I'm like, wait, so all these, like, there are things that we've been told and we've been taught that actually, well, there are people that have not been written about.
Yeah, and I think there's like some stuff that is proper,
books like this bring that up.
And I think there's proper knock-on impacts that some stuff had as well. Like, you've got, you know, when they talk about, again, just, you know, covering the rest of the ancient place, talking about in ancient Rome, the modesty that was demanded from women, and how they were barred from drinking at a point in time when it got to a certain point in time. But the knock-on impact wasn't just about them physically being unable to drink. It also stunted their abilities to join in the influential conversations. So if alcohol is freely flowing where important political decisions are being made, like if these are happening in rooms, you know, behind closed doors, in rooms where important decisions are being made, but you can't be there because you can't drink because of the fact of the modesty, the knock-on impact that has had, like, I think that's bigger than people even realize or think about. Like, that is hundreds and hundreds of years where it's
still happening,
put people behind.
It's still happening.
But I mean, I think there's no wonder that we, you know, some of these instances that they talk about. So there's, you know, there's that. There's, I mean, even talking about when it comes to the alewives and the industrialization of commercial brewing in the mid 14th century, you know, talking about how in the mid 14th century, when they commercialized and introduced new laws, like women couldn't get a foothold in brewing because, you know, they had to have legal independence and money, and they had to be able to sign a contract. They couldn't do that on their own because effectively they weren't their own person. It's like insane. But like, there's no wonder that it's felt like we've had to do things on hard mode historically for ages. And it's because it's felt like we've always had to do it like better, harder, faster, stronger, and in heels, or whatever like that saying is, to make up for the lost time, to prove that we can do things and we have the ability, we're capable, we, you know, we are the same, like despite what some people want to do. And I feel like we've done it. We've had to do it decade after decade after decade. And it sometimes in certain aspects, in certain places, like it feels like you just go, haven't we done this already? Like decades over, why are we still here? How did we still get here? Like reading some of this, like this is why, what I will say, to jump to the end part that I was going to ask, I'm going to say it now. Like, who would you recommend this to? Like, I wouldn't just recommend this book to women. Like I would, or female identifying people. Like I would recommend this book to anybody that wants to learn about some of the history of this stuff, because it gives you such insight into society. Like even when it comes to like women being pitted against other women. So they talk about in the sake factories around the same time as what was happening in the mid 14th century in Japan. Same things were happening to women in the sake breweries, where they were kind of getting kicked out of there as well. And there was a folklore that went around that was like, oh, the sake spirit is a woman and is angry and jealous about having other women in the brew house. So you can't, you know, we can't have other women in there. It's got to be men only. And it was very like, became very only men allowed in there until more recent times. And that feels like, again, like that's a history of even just like pitting women against women in that way. So there was a lot of things I felt like were really interesting talking points that made me think a bit deeper than what I probably would have on my own. And I felt like reading this was more like a conversation. Like I'd read it and then I'd go, that is a really interesting point. And then I'd like have to go and note something down because I'd be like, I didn't think about it like that. And it's made me think about something slightly different.
And we talk about some of these things as historical, you know, the way back ones are. But, I mean, when you think about the timeline of life, you know, and women not being able to do things and being restricted from doing things, my mum couldn't sign, like, had to have my granddad and then my dad sign for her credit card because she wasn't allowed to
Seriously?
sign for her own card. Yeah, her first credit card was signed for by my granddad, because they needed a guarantor. She couldn't sign for her own credit card. This is within our lifetime. Like, you know, within our lifetimes, these things happen. It wasn't that long ago that a woman couldn't just sign for her own credit card.
I mean,
you know, I remember very distinctly as a child, and even like all the way through her life, my mum would not go up to the bar to order a drink. Women didn't belong at the bar.
Well, I was going to say, it's only been however many years that women could go into a pub.
Could go into
like
a pub.
Shocking.
Like, right.
Shockingly recent.
Like the International Women's Day beer from Han Brew Co., Gill and Coo, in the 80s, they were kicked out of a bar because it was a men's only bar.
That's insane.
Like, you know, and I distinctly remember as a child, as a family, we'd go to the pub and we would be sat off in another room. The women didn't go into the main part of the pub. Women weren't allowed. No, women didn't go into the main part of the pub. We had to be in the family room, and then the men went through to the bar. And you know, I'd go into pubs and things with the family, and I would go up to the bar and order myself a drink. And my mum was like, "Oh no, I don't go to the bar. Women don't go to the bar." You know, and she wasn't. She was a progressive woman. She was a strong woman, but that was what being ingrained into her throughout her life, was that women don't go to the bar.
And I think when that's
also,
ingrained in you,
alcohol, so you know,
when that's ingrained in you as well, though, it perpetuates through your family and onto your children, because that's the mindset you like, in the sense of when that's like, what's ingrained in you.
I'm gonna go pick what I want.
Yeah, you're like, well, someone else orders you. How do you pick what you want?
Right, I'm going to the bar. I don't care.
I think some people don't realise that it's like anytime International Women's Day comes around and people are like, when is there an International Men's Day and stuff? And you're like, literally, women have only been able to like even vote within like roughly just over 100 years. That it's not been a long time.
And even then, the first one were able to wasn't all women. It was only a part of, only certain women were allowed to vote.
But it's like that. And when it comes to like you said, women couldn't go into the main part of the pub. Like, this is all stuff in our lifetime.
Yeah.
See, a lot of this was like, what's interesting is that's even when they can say, oh yeah, women now can go back into the pub. Like, you're allowed in a pub, fine. How long? I wonder how long it took for those spaces to even feel slightly close to having any real numbers in there, because again, just in the same way as like perpetuating to your children, like, this is what's ingrained in me and what's been instilled in what I need to think about this. This is how I feel, and this is what I promote on to the people around me, because that's how I've been raised. It's going to be the same thing of like, it's going to take years, because you're going to go, I never see women in there. I don't want to be the first one that goes in there.
Well, and leading on from that, the Dale Artis, the Gender Pint Gap Revisited report is out. I went to the launch of that the other day, and there's an interesting point in it where they looked at whether women, like they asked women whether what drinks they would order in specific social situations. If they were in a mixed group of people, they would be comfortable ordering beer. If they were in a group of just women, they would be comfortable ordering a beer. If it was one woman with a group of men, they would not be comfortable ordering a beer.
Really? That's interesting.
That is, right? And that is, and it is surmised that is because in that situation, either they feel that they're going to be judged by the people that they're with for ordering a beer, or they feel like they would be judged by society for ordering a beer, because we were talking about, now what was it Annabelle called it, like social value, and a woman's social value goes down if she's not perceived as feminine. So by not ordering a beer, by ordering a beer and not ordering a air quotes feminine drink, your social value goes down. And in a situation where it's just one woman and men, that makes them feel uncomfortable. Now, I'm the sort of person that I don't care who I'm with.
I was going to say,
order a beer.
Jokes on them. I want zero social value. I want no social value.
Exactly.
It means I can stay home.
But we are beer people, and we're in our beer bubble, and we feel comfortable within the places that we go to. This was a chunk of people that are not necessarily within that bubble, that they're
you don't want to try something, you don't want to go.
So this is that the fact that we're at a point where that in 2024, the report was done at the end of 2023, people still feel that way. They're not comfortable in a situation, and that social value, air quotes, is still important. That's dumb. Like, I was just like, that's stupid. But how long is it going to take us to get out of that cycle, to get everyone out of that cycle, not just us that are like, I don't care, I'm going to go do what I want. There are people who don't feel comfortable enough to do that, and that's not fair.
I think that's also plays into like what we've talked about on other episodes as well, about like making things like approachable and making it, because like you're saying, 100%. It's not going to be people that know what they want, know what they like, know what they're into. It's going to be people who, because I think that you don't have that concern as much when you know what you like, you know what to expect, you know what you're going for. You feel like you know enough about what you're getting, that if somebody asked you anything, if it's something that they wouldn't normally think you're going to order, you can be like, oh, actually, I really like these. Here's some talking points. If you've never had some of the drinks that are on, some of the beers that are on tap, and you don't know a lot about beer, like, are you really going to go and take a risk in a group of people that are perceived, rightly or wrongly in that sense as well, perceived to know more about you because it's seen socially as more of a manly drink than a girly drink? Like, you're going to go, these people, whether it's true or not, oh, these people know way more about something than I do, I'm not going to take that risk, because if they ask me a question about it, I'm going to look stupid. Or if they're like, why are you having that? Like, you don't know if it's a good beer to have or a bad beer to have or whatever, so you're less likely to take that risk. But I think if places and spaces make things more approachable and easier accessibility wise for people that don't have all the knowledge. You can start to open that up. But I think you also have to then not allow people to just be dicks in your space. Like, you actually have to feel like you're being horrible. You've got to go
police it.
Yeah.
You've got to make that education available.
You have to create your space. You have to cultivate a space.
Yeah, you've got to cultivate the right space.
Yeah, but that's a whole. I mean, that's a whole separate thing as well. But where that kind of feeds into is really interesting. Is like, you know, some of the notes that I put down was around the, you know, some of the conversation about the Alewives was around the fact that, you know, I wrote a note that's like, no wonder we put so much on ourselves in terms of like blame and otherwise, because like historically the Alewives were blamed for their. So I guess to take it a step back before I say my point, do you want to explain what an alewife is?
Well, an alewife was a woman that was brewing beer. She would generally do it at home, or, you know, in kind of a more domestic setting than, you know, a big brewery. And they, you know, at that time, women would be making beer for the family because there wasn't always potable water. So, you know, sometimes beer was actually safer for everybody to drink. They would make it for the family, and then they might be extra, so they might sell it. Some people did make it as a, you know, as a commercial thing because they were widows or their husbands had left or something had happened, and they, you know, that was a business that was a way of them supporting their family. So there's various different reasons why women were making beer enough to sell to other people, because making beer was part of, you know, the household chores in various different centuries. But alewives would be selling it on as well. And this was before it got big, very big industrial, you know, in industrial versions of it or commercial versions of it, where they started, you know, there were still women brewing, but some of the, you know, there are various different reasons why they got edged out as well. Like, I mean, there's a lot about it in Devils in the Draft Line. So if you want to learn more about that, that's a really good book to go to.
Cannot wait to read that. That might have to be our next book club.
And because you've got to watch, because people are then like, oh, but they wore pointy hats, so witches and alewives are the same thing. Read Devils in the Draft Lines, because that.
Well,
that
I mean,
far more.
I was going to say I've got interesting talking points on that about stuff that I didn't know, which is interesting. But basically, the whole point about me being like, oh, you know, it's no wonder we put that blame on ourselves and we feel a particular way, because historically, alewives were blamed for their customers being gross, pretty much. Like, they were responsible for supervising the customers, watching that their behavior wasn't too violent, too flirty, too inappropriate. If someone was hitting on them and they rejected the advances and somebody got violent, like, oh, that's on them. That's not. It's again going back to what we were talking about. Like, that's all put on the alewives. Yeah. The people who are having to deal with the bullshit, they're the ones that are now being seen as the responsibility owners for the bullshit.
And it would also be like, oh, this woman, you know, keeps birds and lets them poop in the beer, and like there was all these different things, like, oh, she look, you know, this woman looks gross, blah blah blah.
She looks gross.
She looks gross. I found she's a woman, so that's important that she looks gross.
So many times in this book, so many times in this book. So that I didn't hear about. I mean, I don't think those bits were in this book about the pooping and the bird. Yeah,
pooping. that's in Devils in
the Draft. So many times, time and time again, what I found as a consistent theme, like throughout, it doesn't matter if it was ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Rome, ancient Greece, like whatever, they always go to like Chiago though. Like it's always like
it's like, who gives a shit? So are you.
Yeah, like we're all ugly. It's like we are all struggling to survive.
But dude, you ain't no looker. So what you going on about?
We're thriving out here. We don't have running water. Yeah, we're all ugly. Like it's fine. Like none of us are.
Did she turn you down? She turned you down. Yeah, that's it.
It all feels like what it comes back to is like the one thing that that the men have on these women is they're like, yo, she gross though. Like, so like you've got like the tunning of Eleanor running, which talks about Eleanor being ugly and a bad craftsperson.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, like it's the two things that come up time and time again.
Yeah.
Which is always weirdly in the order of like, first tell them they're ugly.
Yeah.
And then number 2, tell them they're bad at whatever it is they do.
Whatever it is.
Like it's always this like negging technique of like, yeah, well, you're gross and you're dumb.
No one owes the world. No one owes the world pretty. Sorry to tell you, nobody owes that to anybody. I don't owe you a smile. I don't owe you looking nice. I'm just me, man. If you don't like it, off your part.
Yeah, but that made me laugh. Is I feel like every section they'd be like, and then like someone come in and be like, well, that's fine, you're ugly. Like I'm very much parent, but it always like came back to somebody would be like, I'll just discredit them. Like there was the bit about the ancient Greeks, and what they didn't really like was about the women drinking, and you know the Romans were the one that were more like, women can drink, it's fine, whereas the Greek had like
not the same as me though.
The Greeks had an intolerance to women drinking, like full stop, and it's thought, so in this book it talks about how it's thought that that's why they had such a strong dislike for their neighbours in Etruria, which was located I think in present day central Italy. They thought, like, I've written down the notes from the book, so they thought they were degenerates and morally corrupt, thought the women were morally corrupt, all because they would drink there. And they were welcomed at dinner parties and banquets, which was like considered shocking. And it even said like oftentimes women were leading the toasts and drinking alongside men, and they had their own drinking vessels, and there was more autonomy than their Greek counterparts. And I wrote a note under it that this is how I view stale older members of a particular group, their stereotypes and how they feel about seeing women in pubs. I was like, oh, that's what I think of when I see that. But it's like they see that and then they just go, what? You can't.
We'd like you to find the difference in these two pictures.
Yeah, so they're the same picture. But I just thought that was funny because it always goes back down to like, oh, it's like question their morality, tell them they're ugly, and tell them they're bad at what they do. Like that is how you take someone down about 5 pegs. Like they're like, we need to humble these people, they're getting too big for their britches, tell them they're ugly, tell them they're shit at their job, and that they are too promiscuous. But yeah, so the Alewives, that was really interesting as well, because as you said, it talks about, you know, wearing the hats, and there was a good quote that about all the creepiness and the people, like how they were kind of responsible for their patrons, and their patrons. It wasn't about what they cultivated their location to be like. It didn't matter who they were, but if you had like lecherous, creepy weirdos coming in, like, well, that's it. That's on you. That's not the guys for being weird. That's on you, and that's the space you've created. And it says, like one of the quotes was, "Creepy men predate ice cubes, indoor plumbing, and bowls of salty snacks as an alehouse fixture." Yeah. That was another one that killed me. I was like this is when I said the one word I'd say to describe it was like preach. I was like, that's a good one, preach. Like, great.
Can I just recommend another book?
Yes, please do.
The
Baron of Books. You could have been the Baron of Books on Instagram.
There'll be one of those. Baroness of Books.
Baroness of Books. That would have been awesome.
Men to Avoid in Art and Life by Nicole Tazingi.
I like that name.
Tazingi.
Men to Avoid in Art and Life. Okay.
Men to Avoid in Art and Life. She has an Instagram account that I follow and is one of my faves.
Please tell me it's just photos of creeps in art, like in ancient art.
100%. She's also got another book that's
that's a good one.
She's got loads of different ones. What's the other really good one? That's Friends to Keep in Art and Life, which is then like pairs of women like supporting each other. But it's brilliant. So it's like all these different paintings, and then it will be like there's like a woman doing something and a man's like kind of stood here, and it's like an old painting, and he's like, you're doing that wrong.
I can't tell you so how much I love that.
Nick Signey _writes. She's brilliant.
I love that.
Her Instagram account is amazing. You need to follow her. She's great.
I'm gonna follow it because I love like the like Renaissance art, like when people take the artwork and then put stuff over it. It's my favourite.
Literally, the one that came across today was there's a woman sat doing a painting and there's a guy like looking over her shoulder, and she says, "Damn, I'm good." And he's like, "Just so you know, men like me find it very unattractive when girls brag about themselves." And she says, good to know. I'll do it way more.
Again, that's like another. So I imagine the next response is like, "It's fine because you're ugly, anyways."
There's literally one. Like, there are ones that are literally that. Like it's so, but
I love that. Is like, right up my alley.
Woman with a man looking over her shoulder. I'm going to repeat what you said, but louder and with more authority, as if I thought of it myself.
That's a good one. All right, I'm definitely. I know a few people that are going to get that as a Christmas present this year because I think they'll really appreciate that.
Her books and her Instagram are fabulous.
That was the perfect recommendation for that because that really fits the bill there. But that leads into about how I was talking about. You mentioned the pointy hats and all that.
Yeah.
So the whole thing around that you were talking about, for everyone else's reference, it's in the book. It is in Girly Drinks. Go get it. Go read it. But it's all about how alewives wore really tall hats. Sometimes they could be, they were pointed. They could be about 2 feet tall sometimes. That's not all the time. Just it could be up to 2 feet tall.
Yeah. So there's two schools of thought on this. Some people say that they wore these hats so they could be seen in the market. Some people say it was just the dress of the time. So
I don't think I've ever seen that as just the dress of the time from what I've seen. So that's interesting. Well, okay, according to this book, it was a marketing scheme that they would have the up to 2 feet tall hats sometimes, and that they have their advertising, their ale stakes for advertising their products, which were described in this book only. I don't know. As a long stick with a bundle of twigs, which essentially looks like the broom that witches carry, and they supposedly brewed in large cauldrons. And so they were like, oh, obviously that paired with the church being against them, and them being seen as improper and immoral and everything else. It's like, oh, witches. Which the thing that I made a comment on about the whole witches, witchcraft, all that, as a person that grew up 15-minute drive from Salem and having every Halloween our history classes would talk about Salem witch trials and witches and everything else. This is never what I heard of the basis of witches and witchcraft, which is interesting because this was like, yes, this is sort of like the idea of where witches came from and why these things are iconic. But like, that's not how I learned. Like, this was the first time that I'd ever really heard that association between stuff.
Yeah, so I heard it a few years ago. It made the rounds a couple of years ago, which I think is one of the things that inspired The Devil's in the Draft Lines. Because as a historian, those, she looked into those different stories and was just like, no, it's not true. Like, there are things there that kind of come together and could be, but there's no one can find any solid evidence to back that up. I mean, everyone's like, oh yes, the witches in Salem. There were no witches in Salem. It was people being mean to one another. Like, and
when you say there's no witches in Salem, when you say there's no witches in Salem,
there were during Hocus Pocus.
The witch trials were in Salem. So
there were witch trials.
Witches,
were any of those
people
unquote. Actual witches?
Absolutely not. I mean, we all like the best part is like if you
book. There's another book recommendation. Read The Crucible.
Oh yeah,
actually a play, but
But do you guys? So this is a question. Do you guys have to read that in school as mandatory? Because we have to read it in school mandatory.
We don't have to. It sometimes it ends up on the syllabus. I read it for funsies.
It was mandatory for us to read it. I think we were like middle
it's because it's also based on the Watergate business as well, isn't it?
Watergate.
Or no, it's based on it's not based on Watergate. It's also based on some US political stuff as well that were then dubbed witch trials as well. So it's set in Salem and uses that storyline, but actually it's based on some American.
So I don't know that because they did not teach us that, because they probably didn't want to teach us that.
Yeah, they wouldn't.
They were like, it's 100% about the witch trials.
History's written by the,
yeah. No,
by
100%. We just talked about it in the capacity of like witch trials. But yeah, that is it. Like that was interesting for me reading this because I was like, I'd never, like, to me, this was never an association to witches or anything like that. So I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting to learn about. It would be interesting to read the other 2 books that are unofficial accompaniments to see those point of views as well. Because like I said, I mean, I think I probably had a lot of exposure to the idea of like witchcraft and witches, maybe more than some other people because of where I was located. But yeah, that was an interesting one. But again, it was like, to discredit them, it all came down to discredit the Alewives. It all came back down to like, you're bad at your job, you're ugly, and and so that's basically, it goes back into that your sexuality is grim, your faith is grim, like all of that school of thought. Either way, in terms of the Alewives, I want to get a disobedient alewife tattoo. I just want the writing disobedient alewife. I think that would be great.
Let's make t-shirts.
I think I'm just going to get it tattooed. I think that would be awesome because I want a beer-related tattoo, but I don't want to do that thing that everyone does, or the same few things that everyone does. And I feel like disobedient alewife really would drive the point of exactly how I identify. But I'm not I don't brew, so maybe that's not the one for me. But
you have brewed, though.
Yeah, I guess I have, but maybe not enough to do that.
You can identify as an alewife if you want to identify as an alewife.
That's I could do. But yeah, no, I found that really interesting, and then that kind of led in.
That's a good Instagram handle name as well.
Disobedient I'm sure someone's got that. If they've got the Baroness of Books, they definitely have disobedient alewife. But then it sort of led into the whole conversation of, okay, well then from there, because they were then slowly forced out of being able to do what they wanted to do, taverns came up on the rise in England and Europe, and that became a very heavily male-dominated space. There was around 5 to 10% only that were run by women. That was in the early 1600s in England. Those were predominantly widowers and brewers as well. And so, yeah, I mean, it didn't mean that women were drinking less, but it just meant they could still drink in public. They just weren't doing it as much. It moved into the home space. And I mean, I guess in that sense, when people make the joke about the phrase, like, oh, get back into the kitchen, I'd be like, well, that's cool if that means I can go and drink in an inclusive space with people that will leave me alone, then absolutely will do that. But I thought it might be interesting to get your thoughts on the impact.
Making you a sandwich, though.
No, I'm too drunk for that. But I thought it might be interesting to talk to you about the whole shift in that drinking culture of the moving into the kitchen as opposed to drinking in those public spaces, to talk about kind of the knock-on impact that's had. But I have poured another beer and I will just shout about it because it's really good. It's Amity Brew Co. and Duration's collab Invisible. I thought it was very it's a Dunkelweizen, 5.4% International Women's Day 2024. It is tasty. I had it on tap and I thought the name Invisible just felt like really great for some of this, and it being an International Women's Day brew. So yeah, that's what I'm having now. But yeah, I've definitely noticed, like, in my habits, a lot of stuff does get centered around the kitchen, and I don't know if that has a knock-on impact from older times, and that's just never really shifted away from that, or what. But like, do you find?
I think it depends on how you're brought up. Because I think, like, if people come to my house, we sit in the kitchen because usually we're drinking and that's the place where we, because then we're near the fridge.
Yeah, but again, that's, you just go, oh, because usually we're drinking and that's where we are. Like, does that not give you pause to go, yeah, that is weird? Like, if you could go to a lounge and sit in a lounge, I bet it's warmer.
I haven't got the big table in the lounge.
You don't need a table to hold a drink.
Well, no, but if we're having beers around and we're sharing them.
Oh, that's fair.
We set them all out, and then we'd have snacks all laid out on the table as well.
That's fair.
Yeah. I don't know. It kind of depends. But then when, like, I go to my family for Christmas or for New Year's, we sit in the living room. So I think it just depends. I think it depends on the space that you've got.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And where you're most comfortable to be in that space. And my family, often the dining, like air quotes dining room, was part of the living room. So you'd have all of that kind of laid out in that space. So it depends. Depends on the shape of your house.
Yeah.
For me.
To be fair, that feels fair. But I always feel like no matter where I am, like with my in-laws or here, like we struggle to get people to migrate away from the kitchen because it just feels like that's the gathering space. Like it just always feels like that is
also,
the gathering
I feel like that
space.
because you're like a bit like, I know your in-laws are different, but your family, like big Italian American family, like it's about the food, right?
Oh God, yeah.
So then you end up being centered in the kitchen because that's where the food is.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think it depends culturally. It depends on what your family background is, what the space is like. So I think there's lots of factors. I don't think it is just down to kind of women were shifted off into not now. I think a lot less now than it was previously. That kind of women got shuffled off into that. I mean,
I think I just think of it in a longer knock-on impact of that is like because that happened.
I say that though.
How long does it take to move away from that and to not build your life around that?
When I was a child, I would go with my grandparents to visit my nan's sisters. She came from a big family, so we would go visit 2 of her sisters, 3 of her sisters, and we kind of alternate them every weekend. And my granddad and my great uncle, whichever one it was, would go to the pub, and the kids and the women would stay in the house. Or, not necessarily the pub. Sometimes they'd go to the working man's club where women weren't allowed.
There's so many of those historically across the globe.
Yeah. And this was when I was a child. Like the men would go off and drink and the women would stay in the house and socialise in the house. So even then in like the 80s, that was still happening. So that division isn't a far off historical thing.
Yeah, I think that's kind of more what I was thinking is it's maybe not necessarily the kitchen, but like I do still see that there are those, like I even see like maybe it's just me, and again it kind of depends on your upbringing and stuff, but like even then when I was like younger growing up, like there'd be very clear divide of like the men would go and watch sports even if you didn't care about sports, and then the women would be like, cool, we're going to sit in the kitchen, maybe play cards in the kitchen and chat, and like we're going to have more communication. The guys are just going to sit and stare at a TV.
So that is also something that came up during the Dale Artist report launch, because men are kind of socialised, at least in this country, possibly America as well, Western countries, they are socialised from an early age to gather and watch sports, and it kind of prevails throughout their lives, and that's how they're it's part of their socialising is getting together with other men and going to watch sports, whether it's in a pub, whether it's an actual sporting thing, whether it's at somebody's house.
You don't have to talk, you together. Just sit there next to each other.
But if you and then when you're going to the pub to meet up with friends to watch sports is a big thing. Whereas women don't necessarily do that. We're seeing more of it now. The pubs and the bars that are putting on women's football, for example, or there's sports bars now that just play women's sports. Like, that's amazing. But generally, women, we socialise and communicate in a different way. So it's just different. I mean, me and you go to the pub and have a drink.
I know women that go and watch sports. Like it's not exactly. It's not that, but I think that as a whole, like the majority, you don't see like groups of women being like, meet you at the pub at this day at this time to watch sports. Right. I think if anything, what you tend to see more so is in those situations like, come round and we'll have dinner and we'll have snacks, because it's like more of a experience. It's more of a socializing experience.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I married Rick, because he does not like sports, so like we the men are all but also it's not even about not liking sports. It's the fact that what I really like about him is he's not afraid to go, I don't like sports and I'm not just going to sit there and pretend to watch it. Like he's like, oh no thank you, and he will go and do he'll sit with us and play cards. He'll do the washing up in the kitchen. Like he's like, I don't need to sit and watch something that I don't even know what I'm watching. Whereas there's a lot of people that would just go,
yeah,
this is what I do. I'm going to sit there and just do it and not complain about it.
See, Gordon is a diehard football fan. And he watches
That's okay. We forgive him for it.
Well, yeah, it's fine. You know what? I prefer that he's a football fan to the fact that he's a gamer who plays games constantly.
Because I've got the opposite.
I know.
I'm okay with it.
You know, when gamers are fully just, you know, they walk in the door and they're on the computer for hours and hours and hours. I'd rather he watches football than do that.
Whereas I'm very happy with my gamer husband. We sit in bed, he's playing games, I'm there doing my video games that are more slice of life. Like I've got a pizza making game and he's just like, do you want to play this game with me? And I'm like, I would, but I'm making pizza right now. The shop is rammed. I don't have time. We can do this later when the day is done. Because I like to fill from an empty cup. I like to do my day job, someone else's day job, my evening job, which is making pizzas. But yeah, no, it's an interesting thought, because I did think about it in the concept of like, historically from growing up, like I have seen that divide of like women go here and the men go there. And I think like our generations are less.
I think we're starting to break that trend.
Yeah.
But let's look at how long that has taken.
So long.
2024.
Hundreds of years. But I find that like alone was that was a really cool thing to like, not a cool thing, but a cool thing to like kind of read that and go, oh, actually be prompted to think about something like that and to think differently about it, which is why I go back to the point of like, would I recommend this just for women? Like, no, I would recommend this to anybody that wants to want to be prompted into being like, oh, let me think deeper about certain aspects of like the day-to-day that I wouldn't have normally thought about. So yeah, that was one particularly interesting point. There's not too much else for me to say. There's the key points of like other things that she covers that I think are interesting is like the different types of drinks, mother's coddle, bride's ale, which bride's ale, bridal. You can work that out for yourself. Tiki bars. There's a whole interesting debate on tiki bar culture towards the end of the book as well. As we said, covers a pu'e. Like really, really great stuff. Yeah, I'm big advocate on it. So yeah, I don't know. Anything else?
Highly recommend. I highly recommend this book. Go and get it. You can. It is available in audio. You can do it on Audible. A women's place in the brew house is also on Audible if you are an Audible person. But if you want to read The Devil's in the Draft Lines, you've got to get the book.
And we do apologise that we didn't talk more about the book directly. Because we talked about a million other things that stemmed off of it. But yeah, I didn't want us to give too much. I wanted to talk about all the really cool, interesting stuff that would make you want to go and read the book. So do it with the pairing. Take it chapter by chapter with a drink of your choice, the drink of pairing, and the playlist. That's all going to be linked to you. Go check out more of Mallory's stuff, because I know I am going to do that. And secretly wish that she were my friend, because she seems super cool. But yeah, Joe, if people want to talk to you more about book stuff, where can people find you? And you can use this to plug your Bookstagram again as well.
I mean, if you want to talk to me about books, then you have to come to my Bookstagram, which is Joanne_listens to books, because audiobooks are reading. Thank you very much. If you want to talk to me about beer, and you want to see, and I do post beer and book pairings on my Instagram. You can find me at Love Beer Learning, and I'm on Facebook, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Pinterest. But really, you're going to find me on Instagram. Or you can come to my website, which is lovebeerlearning.co.uk. There are some book recommendations on the blog. Or you can email me, lovelylearning@gmail.com. Tell me what books you recommend, because like my TBR isn't hundreds of years long anyway, I will continue to
audio
add to
books,
it. So
you can multitask.
I do, but my to be read list is still ridiculously long, but it doesn't matter. I will continue to add to it. So email me and let me know your book recommendations, no matter what they are. I enjoy reading widely. Tori, if they want to get hold of you, where can they get hold of you and recommend you books?
Yeah,
or
please.
Ask you more
Oh my god, yeah.
about
I will happily talk more about this. I've got so many more notes that I didn't even talk about. Chop those off because I was like, snip, snip. Let's not even get into some of that. But yeah, you can come talk to me even more about this book, your love for this book, why you should read this book. Please come and recommend me more memoirs and memoirs.
Yeah, you're a memoirs.
Like I do like a good bit.
Reader.
Certain memoirs, I can't just read anything. It has to be like a really good, interesting one. But recommend me, memoirs, podcasts, like more content, especially around the bootleggers. I didn't even get into Shebeen Queens. That was like, if nothing prompts you to go look at a book, do you want to know what a Shebeen Queen is? It's not just a great name. Shebeen Queen is, just
and the bartenders. We didn't get
we didn't get to like 50% of this book. We were too busy talking about Spice Girls. Good. And if anybody wants to know, I feel I associate most with Ginger Spice, but you can come talk to me on Instagram at adventures_in_hoptimism. You can email me all the great links that you have for all these things at adventuresinhoptimism@gmail.com. If you want to talk to both of us and just be like, guys, when you do a book club, please just talk about the book, not about everything else.
We can't promise that.
Mallory, you can send us, you're not listening to this, but Mallory, you can send us a message and be like, guys, come on, you're really not doing me justice here. Or my
tell Tori that you'll be friends with her.
No, don't lie to me like that. You can find us at A Women's Brew on Facebook, Instagram, and I'm not naming all the other things because we don't go on there. Or you can email, Instagram mainly. That's where at least one of us will respond. Or you can email in. If there's any other books that you want us to read, send it to us. We'll add it to our ongoing list of book club books. I think for the podcast book club, it's probably good to keep it somewhat beer related. It doesn't have to be a true story, just related to beer or alcohol in some way. Recommend it to us. You can email us at awomensbrewpodcast@gmail.com. On that note, let's go finish the rest of this beer and tuck ourselves into bed. Cheers.